Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. The first one here for 2024, although I noticed I've named my webcast incorrectly. It's still 2023. I'll fix that for next time. I hope everyone is doing well, had a good holiday season. We are back. We've got a nice series of webinars and presentations coming up. And so today we're going to kick one off with a presentation on Alpha TransForm. Next week we'll be back to Alpha Anywhere, but I'm here to answer questions of really any kind for any of the Alpha products. Looks like I do have, looks like we do actually have a couple of questions that have already come in. So those are great. Go ahead and type those questions into the GoToWebinar control panel. Or if you'd like, send them on to guides, GUIDES at alphasoftware.com. So Alpha TransForm is a product that is used for, I see people can hear, I know people can hear me because you're asking me questions, but I just want to make sure you can see my screen. You should be able to see a monitor and a little phone here on my PowerPoint. If someone could just say, yep, I can see your screen in the questions box, that would be great. Wonderful, thanks so much. All right, excellent. So TransForm again is it's a product often used by people in the field for collecting data on forms, but these are very, very smart forms that can have programming behind them. They can do API lookups, they can do all kinds of stuff. So they go well beyond forms. We always think of our forms almost as mini applications, if you will. And starting at the end of last year, we opened up a free version of Alpha TransForm that anyone can play with and use for their personal use. And we had come up with a suggestion of some smaller projects that you might be interested in doing them for. You could do it for home inventory. You could do it for keeping track of any type of collection. If you're a bird watcher, you might want to build an app out for that. Or if you're a coach or a team event organizer, or if you want to do expense tracking, whatever it is, TransForm is really cool, really easy to use. But we have a novel use for TransForm that we actually needed here, and that was using TransForm as an ROI calculator. So you've probably seen ROI calculators online. They can be used for a lot of different reasons. You basically say, you know, the bottom line is how much did I put in? How much did I get back? And what is the return on my investment? Well, here's where we needed one at Alpha, and it had to do with our sales folks who were talking to a very particular kind of customer. They are people who are into manufacturing, manufacturer quality. So let's say we have a salesperson over at Alpha. We'll call him Brendan. We actually have a real Brendan. It kind of looks like that even. And he'll talk to the person who is in charge of the buying decision, and they'll say, you know, your software looks great, but can we just run some numbers and see if it makes sense? And so this is, and yeah, I guess I am selling you Alpha TransForm right now. So if you are a quality manager, pay attention. I'm trying to sell you this, but if not, I just want to show you this as an example of how we can put together forms like this. So in this case, Brandon would be talking to someone and they'd say, okay, can you tell me what it costs when you have a downtime on the assembly line? You know, oh, that runs around $800 an hour or something like that. What's it cost to have to do rework? That's when something comes off the assembly line, but it's not quite right, so it needs some further processing for it to be used. Then there's costs involving scrapped materials. There's cost involving returns. In other words, a product makes it out to the customer and then it comes back in a bad shape. Overtime costs, often related to downtime costs, having to make up for errors. Costs for printing. There are a lot of paper forms that are used when doing manufacturing, and that is not an insignificant cost. And then those paper forms are often have to be data entered back into a system. I don't think data entered is a real word. They need to be entered into a system by a data entry person, and then there's usually some cost associated with that in terms of how much you pay the person to do that. There are also errors. There's other reasons too that make it a good reason to digitize, but I'm not going to get into any of those. So let's just say though you've done this, okay? And what you want to do is you want to then send off a presentation to your to the person you're talking to, the prospect at the company. Maybe they have to take that and show it to their boss in order to get approval to make the purchase. So instead of just sending off like a real simple spreadsheet like this, wouldn't it be nice if we could do something a little bit fancier and show off TransForm at the same time. So that is what we've done. What we've done is we've created a little TransForm form that's very similar to the spreadsheet that I just showed you. So the prospect comes in, the salesperson, or Brendan, if you will, comes in and he types in company name, Acme Corporation. And then from just interviewing the person on the phone or Zoom or just talking to them, he gets a sense for what their actual costs are in terms of downtime and rework and things like that. And then because we know a product probably isn't going to work 100% of the time, maybe some downtime is not avoidable, so we put in what's called a savings factor. And that's how often will a digitized system prevent this cost from occurring. Maybe it's not that high with downtime. Maybe it would only stop half of the downtime, which still might be pretty big. But then for other things like printing costs, well, if we replace all the printing costs, the savings factor is going to be 100. So what we do here in this form is we do some calculations, and then at the very end, we come up with a total, which is down here at the bottom. Right now, these are zeros, but I'll show you one filled in. And what would happen is the salesperson fills this in, comes up with a total, and then sends over both an invitation to TransForm as well as a Quicklink URL. Now, Quicklink is a newer feature in Alpha TransForm. It came out in the last version, and it's been expanded in this new one that's coming up shortly. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So a Quicklink basically is an SMS or email message that the person can click on and then automatically pop open that form for them to take a look at. And they can do that on they don't even need to install a mobile app. They can do it right in their web browser. When they're done, they click upload form or however they want to say it, submit, and it then can create a very fancy PDF document, with nice graphics and styling and all of that. We'll get into the creation of that kind of document in a future webinar. But then a copy of that is automatically sent out using TransForm's on-submit event, both to the prospect as well as to the salesperson for their copy. So let's take a look at this in action. I'm going to pop over to TransForm here. And I think this is where we're going to go. I am going to, let's do it in TransForm beta. Actually, I want to talk about the beta a little bit later on too. So here we are in TransForm beta, and I have created this form. I'm going to go ahead into Designer. And beta is not on the fastest server. It's not on our production server, which is quicker. So let me just load this. And so here is my TransForm ROI calculator. And as you can see here, I'm going to just make that a little bigger. I'll set that maybe to a medium screen. Here it is. Now I've set some default values as well. And these are preview values, a little bit different than default values. I'm going to get into that in a second. But I've also set up a bunch of TPL, a bunch of programming code behind the scenes to make all of this work. So for example, for the downtime, and let's click into that so I can show you the individual fields. The downtime is made up of a field called hour, which is there. In other words, hourly price for downtime, which I call DP for a downtime price. DQ, not for Dairy Queen, but for downtime quantity of hours. And then DT, downtime total, is here. And then we take that. So one is multiplied by the other. That becomes multiplied by its savings factor. And that's how you get that total there. Now you'll notice nothing here is calculating because this is just a preview window. But if I went over into the TransForm filler, which I'll do right here, I think I'm logged in one of these places. Maybe I'm not. Let me log in real quick. And we'll take a look at one that's already been filled out. And I think I called this one the user's guide account. Here we go. Okay. Oops. Let me just go to my other account. Sorry about this. Here we go. In fact, I've already filled some out already, so that's great. Let's choose one from January 8th. That was a few days ago. So here is, I'll dismiss that. Here is the company name that I've already filled out. I filled out hours, number of hours, and you can see this is actually now calculating the right thing. So here are I decided we didn't do any rework. I think I just did data entry on a couple of them. And then down here is where it's figured out all of the totals. And let's say we quoted them a price of, say, $5,000 for their TransForm installation. We could see that it's a return on investment of 520%. And again, when they click that upload form button, what's going to happen is that after it is uploaded to the server, it's going to go ahead and just generate a nice report. So, I'm logged out. Well, anyway, you get the point. Generate a nice report, which I'll show you how that works later. What I do want to show you, though, are a couple of things of how we put this form together, both the TPL part and also the layout part. So I'm going to start with the layout because that confuses people the first time they see it, but or actually even the second time they see it. But once I show it to you the third time, you'll probably get it. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Oh, by the way, did you notice up here, show video for Form Designer tab? These all now have videos that are associated with them. That'll be coming out in the new version. You can hide those videos just by clicking the X, which is what I'm going to do here. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to go take a look at how we put these together. Now you'll notice that we put hours here, three across, and then under here we did 2 across, but we made them the same size as the ones above, and we moved them over to the right because that's how we decided we'd like to have it formatted. So this is how you do that in Alpha TransForm. What you want to do is you want to select, for in this case, these 3 fields and place them in a section. And I did that by selecting them, just clicking on them and clicking the plus button. And then I scrolled down to section start and I clicked enclose. And that created a section for me. Then within the section, what I did is I went down to the layout property of the section and I clicked on that. And this opened up a little side window. And I told it that I want this for every resolution, whether it's small all the way up to extra large. I want it to be 3 columns across, which is what I've done here. When that's done, I've clicked save. And now it knows to put them all in the right place. Now, for here, for each one of these, I didn't really have to do anything for its layout because they're already by default basically 1 width wide. So that was simple. Now for this one, it was a little bit different. We also broke this up into, in this section where we have the 3 down here, but we moved them over. We have a sort of a hanging indent. What we did is we went over to, that's not a hanging indent, that's a proper indent, sorry. I'll click on the layout here and I'll show you what I did. Again, for each of the sizes, I did it the same way. I set the, oops, except here, clearly I made a mistake, but here I set it to 3 columns, right? But I said that I would like it to start at the first column. So to do that, I said, I believe I went over to this one. Yes, 3 columns, let me save that. And then in the field itself, I told it to start at position 2. And then this next one, I think I could leave alone because by default, it would move over to position 3, the very next one after that. So that's how that works when you're doing these layouts. You take the fields, you put them in a section, then in the section, you set the layout. And if necessary, you'll also set the layout for the fields if you want them to start in a different position or you want them to be a different width. So I just wanted to cover that one last time because we do still get questions on that. A couple other things we did on this form. I'll go back here. And in fact, we'll save those changes because I realized I just fixed an error. The other thing we did here is that we set a color and an icon. Now this is in the advanced section, but this isn't a very advanced thing to do. You can do this on any of your forms. The advanced section, by the way, is hidden by default. So as you click this icon here, it opens it up. And if you click on set color and icon, I chose from one of the default ones here, but I didn't have to. I could have pasted in the SVG code for an icon if I wanted to get one, say, from Flat Icons or another source. I also decided that I wanted to set this tab color to a very specific color, so I put that color in there. So that was the colors for that. The other thing I wanted to point out before is that I was careful to set field titles. So let me go back into the designer and I'll show you what I mean. When I was setting up these fields, for example, this $1 per hour, I need to give it an internal name, one that I can use later on when I'm doing calculations. And I tend to keep these short as I can, so that they're easy to remember when I set them up in TPL to do calculations. So just make sure you name your fields. That's that. I know I've said it 1,000 times, but I'm gonna keep saying it. Let's go back now and take a look at the TPL, because that's the last thing that I kind of want to show you in terms of the setup of this. And let's go ahead and edit custom code. So again, if you want to add TPL code to your form, you'll find that in the advanced section. You need to enable custom code for this form type by clicking yes, and then you'll click on the edit custom code button right here. When you do that, this editor appears. There's a bunch of cool stuff in here, and it's worth taking a look at the help. There's a couple kinds. There's this help up here, but you can take a look here and get additional help. All right, let's move out of the way. Over here on the right, you'll see that I have an entry for basically every one of my fields, every one of my form commands. So for example, that $1 per hour field that I was showing you, the one that I called DP, is right there. And in this DP field, I've added some code, and that code will execute anytime I change the value of that field. Let's go down to another one, TransForm cost, okay? When I enter in the TransForm cost, I'm going to want to figure out what the savings are and what the return on investment are based on any cost reductions that have been calculated. So I'm going to click on that right here, changed, and I'm going to show you the code that I used to put in behind it. All I did here was I said TS, which is total savings, is equal to cost reductions minus the cost of TransForm itself. And now I've set that field. And then I set the return on investment equal to that TS field, which I just set, divided by the TransForm cost times 100, because I'm doing a percentage. And I used the round function. You'll find all the functions over here in the reference section, because I wanted it to be an even percentage. I didn't want it to be a fraction. So that's all I had to do there to put that together. Now, many of these cases, you'll see that one calculation depends on another calculation, depends on another calculation. And if you're used to using a spreadsheet, you'll know that you often, when you set up your calculations, say in a spreadsheet, you can make a change to one cell, and that change will then flow through to a bunch of other cells. It doesn't quite work that way in TransForm. In TransForm, if you change something that was used in a calculation that had already been calculated, it's not going to go back and redo that calculation. So as a result, for example, if I make a change in the $1 per hour value, I need to make changes to a bunch of different variables here underneath. For example, I need to change the downtime total, and so I can multiply it by the quantity times the price. I need to calculate out the savings factor to figure out the savings. And then I also need to figure out those total savings and the ROI. Those two fields down here are referenced in that very field. So when I make a change here to that one field, I'm actually changing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things all at the same time. I can't just change one and expect another event to pick it up, because it won't. Now, a way that you could make this easier on yourself while you were coding it, perhaps, would be to create a function. Maybe have that function automatically do all of the calculations on all of the fields, since it's very, very quick. Once you've defined that function, then you could just put that on the onChanged event for the fields that you needed to put it on. So that's just a suggestion there. I did it here separately just so that we can see what's going on. Now let's pop back over here, because there's one last thing I want to show you, and it has to do with default values. These are different than the preview values. So for example, this says preview value 1. if this says dollar per hour, number of hours, that's it. If I click on here, I think I can set those preview values. I can, right? For example, this is a preview value of 15 or 16 or 17. These preview values only appear here in the preview window. They are not the default value for when you load up a form. Let me show you how you do those, set those default values for when you load up a form. You're going to do that back here in Form Properties and again back in the Advanced Features section. So I'm going to scroll down, and this is the syntax for doing that. You'll find it under Initialization Commands, okay? And then the format is as follows. It's the field name, so DSF, which is the savings factor for, I think that was the downtime savings factor, that followed by a colon. And then you have to tell TransForm what kind of value you're putting in. Are you putting in a date or a time? If you're putting in text or a number, you can just say text. This is a requirement, so you have to just type the word text, T-E-X-T right here. That's followed by a comma, and then that's followed by whatever default value you want. So I set these to 80% for all of the savings factors, except for the one that had to do with data entry costs, because we assume that that would be, data entry would be eliminated, and we can make that 100%. So that's the syntax there for initialization commands, or your default values. So I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about in that form. I'll go ahead and break and see if there are questions. If there aren't, I'd like to show you some of the new features that are coming out hopefully tomorrow. So let's take a look here. So questions. Let's start here at the top. Interesting. Somebody here said that they signed up again for the GoToWebinar, but they didn't get a notification. Just wondering, does anyone else have that experience? I'm going to go maybe talk to the folks at GoToWebinar again. Sometimes their email system doesn't work the way that we'd like it to. Another question, how do you access a parent UX state variable from a child UX using JavaScript? I do not know how to do that off the top of my head. If you want to send that over to guides, I can find out very quickly how to do that for you, and then I can show it to everyone else next week. So I'll try to make a note of it, but if you email me at guides@alphasoftware.com, that would be helpful. All right, so let's take a look. TransForm Beta is going to be released within the next day. It may be released this afternoon, depending on scheduling. But let's take a look and see what is in there. First of all, so we've got release notes, always a good place to look. In version 9.1, we can now do some cool stuff that you couldn't do before. And one has to do with the new data editor in the management console. It's also available on the home screen as well. Let me show you what I mean by that. Let's go back to regular TransForm. That's TransForm Beta. Let's go to just transform.alphasoftware.com. I'll show you what it was and what it is now. So I think you'll see the difference is pretty cool. All right, so, oh, hold on a second. I don't think I can show you the difference. It looks like right now, TransForm has gone live. You'll be able to find the latest version. Wow, during our webinar, this is fantastic. The latest version is here at transform.alphasoftware.com. So I can actually show this to you right now. Let's say I wanted to edit or view a previously filled out form. Often you would do that in the management console. Now you can find that here in the start section. But let's go to the management console. If you recall, in the bad old days, which was apparently about 20 minutes ago, when you had a form, which I'm going to open up in the management console. Oh, my session has expired. Oh, it's on me then. Okay. Choose type, refresh. There it is. And I think I have some instances of this form. I have one. Okay, here it is. here's an instance of the form. You'll now see that it is, and I think it always did this, it displays it the way that it would display on the phone. But until recently, when you clicked the edit button, it all became just plain text fields. Now, when you click the edit button, it now opens up the real web editor and it shows you to whom the form is assigned. And you can make edits, you can use the pick lists, you can use TPL, you could do all the stuff that our bare bones editor basically wouldn't let you. So if you've used Management Console before, when entering in new forms or editing data, you knew that it was a pretty rudimentary experience. We've now cleaned that up for you here. Okay, so let's go back into our release notes. And another one is the email on submit enhancement. Okay, so when you send an email using the on submit, so in other words, you submit a form and Alpha TransForm automatically looks to see whether or not you have any on submit events defined. One of the most common, of course, is email. You want to send that as the form to an email or send it just an email to someone when a form is submitted. In the past, those email addresses were hard-coded, so they would always go to, like, say, the account administrator or a particular employee or something like that. These are all now can now be dynamically specified using either JavaScript or TPL. And in fact, in Alpha Anywhere, which is a companion product to TransForm, you can now define these events using it there, which makes it a little bit easier. And the system now supports that. You can now also use TPL in your on submit conditions. So a lot of times people find JavaScript to be a little bit tricky to work with, and TPL, even though it's not as standard, it's one we made up, is actually a pretty easy language to write in. You can now do all your on submit things there. We also have a log now for the on submit events. This is a big deal. Let's go over and I'll show that to you. Probably not such a big deal in my account because I don't think I have any on submit events defined, but let me go over to define on submit events. And as you can see, I don't have any, but if I did have some, it would say things like send an email, and then the information would be, where, dollar amount equals blah, blah, blah. This would fill up here. But what we now have is a show on submit event log. This is brand new. It's going to be blank in my case, but it's going to show you all the events, and it's going to show you whether or not there were errors when the event tried to take place. Maybe you had an error on a webhook event or report or something like that, and now you can see that. Okay, back over to the on submit events. You can now, there are some now new things that you can do with Quicklink. If you remember in my little PowerPoint here, we're using this TransForm Quicklink to send a form or a link to a form over to our prospect. You can now specify certain things. You could set margins to different sizes. You can set it to a read only, and you can also set it so that the person doesn't necessarily have to have the form assigned to them in order to see the form, which was in the past a restriction. So that's all new stuff in this version. And I think that that's about it, other than, well, we're working with Android. Latest version of Android's now working better. And we have a little getting started video section, and we've got videos. And by the way, those videos here, they do sometimes get in the way, but you can shut them off like I've done here. And when you do that, it gives you a little message that tells you how to get them back. You get them back right here in the More section under videos. And so we've got little videos. I think the longest one is 6 minutes. Most of them are like 3 or 4. So if you're on a particular tab, let's say we want to restore that. If you're on a particular tab and you go to the dashboard or the designer or even the permissions tab, and you want to see how it works, you can go ahead and click that button, and yours truly will take you on a tour of that tab. So that is, I think that's about it. Someone's asking what TransForm is going for now. The free version is free, of course, but limited to the number of form submissions per month. Then if you want an unlimited one, it's done on a per user basis, which I think works out roughly to $30 per user per month. Licensing is higher volume licensing is possible, and we can also make exceptions in cases where users where you need to turn over seats quickly, and it's not always going to be the same person using it. So we can do all kinds of things. If you send an email to sales@alphasoftware.com, they can give you a much more complete answer. How do I put comments in the, oh, this is a good question. It's not transfer related, but how do I put comments in the comments column of the web project control panel? It's a question I just got here. Let's take a look. So let's go into Alpha Anywhere, which I'm going to launch. Oops. Something's going on. Wow, something's messed up. Hang on a second. Is that my nightly? You know what? Why don't I launch the nightly? I was just using that. Looks like I have a corrupt installation. Ah, there we go. Okay. So how do you add comments? I think that the button for that is, oh my gosh, I knew how to do this. Someone out there know how to do this. Add a comment into your, so you know, like this particular UX is used for X, Y, or Z. More customized columns. Okay, thank you. More customize the columns shown in the web control panel. Okay. I guess you go in here. Blah, blah, blah. Store default, import, remove. Oh, I've never actually played around with these. Remove web control, panel customization. Oh, let me learn a little bit more about this. I'll report back next time. But apparently that's where you do it. So open the UX and open information. Oh, interesting. Try that. Edit. Properties, there's other information. Never mind. I'll figure it out next time rather than show you the wrong way. That looks like it for questions. Next week we have a special guest. I won't even tell you that much about it, but I'll tell you, it's not Robin Bennett. It's a brand new person. You're going to really enjoy seeing their presentation. But if you do have questions, do send them over to guys, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. Thank you very much for everyone joining me, and I hope to see you next week at our next Alpha Software demo and Q&A webcast for 2024. Take care. Bye-bye.